the cost to live in a retirement village. When I'm talking about costs, it's quite common in my role. Somebody will, I'll be speaking to someone and they will ask me, can you help me find villages in my area? This is my budget. And I will say to them, well, yes, I can, but you actually need to consider all costs. So I like to break costs into those costs when you're buying into a village, the cost while you're living in the village, and then the cost when you leave the village. And you want to be aware of the costs before you move in at each of these stages. So buying into the village is straightforward. You'll pay a deposit and your initial capital sum, which is commonly known as your entry payment. Then you have costs while living at the village. So the periodic costs, which is commonly known as your weekly fees. So every village will have costs to run that village. So for example, there's staff in the cafeteria over there. They will have ranks. There'll be gardeners out tending to the gardens outside. Most villages offer certain village services, security, insurance on the facilities and the homes. And like I mentioned, staff wages, all of those costs, you as a resident will pay a portion towards. So residents obviously benefiting from the villages and all that it has to offer, all pay a portion, and that's what's known as your weekly fees. So what's exactly included under your weekly fees? What's up here, these are examples. So it's a really good idea when you're talking to the sales manager to get them to outline exactly, well, one, what the weekly fee is, whether it's fixed or will it change over time, and what it includes. You also have personal costs while you're living at the village. So for example, contents insurance, your personal contents insurance, if you have a car, vehicle insurance, phone and internet, and most commonly you'll pay for your own household power on a user pays basis. That's common, but again, check with the sales or village manager. And then add-on services. So most villages will offer additional services that is like user pay basis. So it's up to you whether you opt into these services or not. So for example, if you wanted a housekeeper to come in once every week, meals, some villages, most villages actually have dining areas where you can go and have a meal, or you might be able to order a meal into your home. Hairdressing or beauty services, laundry, and then healthcare services like occupational therapists or physiotherapists. Most villages have contracts where these type of practitioners will come into the village and you can book an appointment to see them, but those are add-on services that sit over and above that weekly fee that you're paying. So just touching on service apartments, so a lot of the costs that we've just gone over, so a lot of these add-on services, as well as some of these personal costs, when you live in a service apartment, they're actually bundled into one, like a tailored package, so that actual weekly fee would be a lot larger, but it includes a lot more. So if you are interested in service apartments, then like I mentioned, sit down with the sales manager and talk to them specifically about how that works and how that cost structure actually differs than if you were coming in as an independent living resident. Leaving costs. So there's 3 leaving costs you want to be aware of. The deferred management fee, and I'll take you through an example. Ongoing weekly fee payments. So those weekly fee payments that we were talking about, when you leave the village, that fee doesn't necessarily stop straight away. So some village operators will have an assurance that as soon as you move out and you've moved out your possessions, that weekly fee will stop. But actually under the code of practice, it doesn't have to be reduced down to 50% until after 6 months of you leaving or your ORA actually coming to an end. So that's a really important question that I encourage you to ask each village that you go and meet with. Meatlife Care villages, I'm pretty sure that fee it ceases straight away. Yeah. There's also additional fees that some villages charge for that sales process, so admin, legal and marketing costs. Now some villages will include that within the deferred management fee that you pay, others will actually add it on top. So again, it's really important that when you're visiting different villages, if they're not owned by the same operator, that you're clear how it works for that specific village. So the deferred management fee, Here in New Zealand, the deferred management fee is typically between 20 and 30% of your initial capital sum, and it's accrued over a 2 to 5 year period. So if we had an example, if you moved in and you purchased a villa for $400,000, it had a deferred management fee of 20%, which was accrued over a 5 year period. If you left after 1 year, in this example, you would have accumulated 4%, which works out to be $16,000 in this example. So what you'd receive back from the operator would be that initial capital sum minus that deferred management fee that you'd accumulated up until that point. In this example, if you moved out after 2 years, you would have accumulated 8%. Then once you get to the capping point, so in this example I've used 5 years, it wouldn't actually matter if you moved out after 5 years, 10 years or 15 years, you just pay that capped deferred management fee, which in this example is 20%. So recapping the costs, so to start with you have your deposit, you pay your initial capital sum, you then have your village periodic fee, which is commonly known as your weekly fee. You have your personal costs like vehicle and contents insurance, any add-on services, so that's like your housekeeping or visiting practitioners like occupational therapists. The deferred management fee, which is going to sit between 20 and 30% for most villages that you visit. Additional fees, so like I mentioned, these additional fees might sit in the deferred management fee or they might be over and above, so make sure you're clear. And that ongoing weekly fee payment, which you might have to continue to pay if the village doesn't have an assurance that it ceases straight away. A change in circumstances, so I'll just touch on this briefly. What I mean here is if you move from being an independent living resident up into being assisted living resident or into higher level care, into the care home. So there's a few things to consider around costs. One being what happens to your occupation right agreement and specifically that deferred management fee. So if you'd been living there as an independent living resident for 3 years and accumulated 3 years, you want to know whether that rolls over or not. Some villages will also charge transfer costs, so that's something else you want to be aware of. And of course, how does your weekly fee payment change? So if you're going from being independent living into a service apartment, assisted living, that weekly fee is going to include a lot more, so the weekly fee will change. So it's important that you're clear about that.